Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, and welcome to our Value Chain Innovation Speaker Series. My name is Barchi Gilai, and I'm the Associate Director of the Value Chain Innovation Initiative at Stanford Graduate School of Business. We're excited to host today Olivia Nottebohm, the Chief Operating Officer at Box, which is a leading cloud-based content management platform. Olivia is an experienced technology executive who has excelled in leadership roles at several technology and software companies. In today's event, Olivia will provide her insights on the dual role of AI at Box, externally as the enabler of powerful capabilities that help Box customers unlock the value of their enterprise content, and internally as an innovative tool for enhancing creativity and operational efficiency within the company. Moderating the discussion is Haim Mendelson, who is a professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Business and the faculty director of the Value Chain Innovation Initiative.
Thank you very much, Barchi. Olivia, it's great to have you with us. And before we go into our subject matter, can you tell us a bit about your professional trajectory and your current role at Box?
Sure. Well, first of all, hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I feel very lucky to have gone to the Graduate School of Business at Stanford and have actually taken a course from Haim. So really just a treat to be back here and wonderful to come full circle. So yes, to answer your question, I went from the business school. I then went on to become a partner at McKinsey. So spent over a decade there working all in tech, always working in B2B businesses and helping them understand both their product portfolios, how they go to market, how they structure their company, M&A, all of that. So really just fantastic experience for then to me go into the world of operating at Google, and there built up the cloud business at Google Cloud. So was the head of strategy and operations and also ran the commercial business for Google Cloud. And this was when we had 0% market share. This is kind of 2015, and we had to convince the world that they should trust Google for enterprise. And then from there, I went on to become the COO of Dropbox, and then I went to a startup called Notion, and now I am the COO here at Box, which I'm incredibly excited about and could not be more enjoying just being in the center of everything AI plus content.
Olivia, I always thought of Box as a very interesting company, and these days it's becoming even more interesting by transforming itself into an AI-first company and helping other companies do that. So let's talk about what it means to be an AI-first company for business in general, and what are the key drivers that drive companies to become AI-first these days, and what does it really mean?
Yeah, so this is actually something we spend a lot of time thinking about, and it's just the reality of business today that we are entering this AI-first era of business. And there's a couple things that are happening, and honestly, based on where you are, in what industry, in what geo, you might be experiencing these in different ways. But in the heart of Silicon Valley, this is definitely how we are experiencing the world. The first is that AI agents are just part of what we consider getting done on a daily basis. So we think about some research we need to do, some competitive analysis we need to do, and we are now thinking about, okay, what agent can help me do that, which is completely different than even, I would say, a year ago, right? So it's all happening very quickly. The second is that actually any workflow in the world of information workers can be automated. There are enough tools out there. We have the capabilities such that things that involved approving one thing and then moving it on to the next step, or scanning a piece of content for information and then taking away that data and moving it into a workflow, all of that actually can be automated. So now the question becomes, what do you automate and where do you get the highest ROI? And we'll talk about that later. The third is that there is now an expectation that you can get pretty much almost instant intelligence from your data. It is mind-blowing for me that we're already at a place where you query a document and the answer is instantaneous. And then if you ask a deep research question where the model has to go back and reconsider, even that, we're still only talking about maximum 30 seconds here. So really, we're in a different era altogether. And then I would say the fourth is that because there is this customer individual experience with AI, right? So because people have the experience of ChatGPT and they have the experience of going in and asking a question of these LLMs and using it just in their personal life, build me a trip to Europe or tell me the history of XYZ, that all of a sudden they're taking those experiences and starting to expect it from the enterprise engagement. So if I can ask ChatGPT about a very intricate question, I then expect my bank to be able to answer a pretty basic question about what are the statement of accounts or whatever it might be my question, right? So there's really this higher expectations overall that individuals are coming when they're interacting with a business. And then finally, and this is the world I live in, many technologists live in, there's a deep, deep appreciation that if everyone has access to all data, a lot of things can go wrong. And so there has to be this governance, there has to be a sense of permissioning, there has to be a deep, deep understanding of how the data is flowing, who has access to it, who can actually leverage AI to draw out insights and automate workflows. So all of this is happening at once. And the question is, how do you harness the power of all of this?
So let's continue with the theme of how do we harness the power of AI? So how should the company really think about its strategy going forward? Any workflow can be automated, but what should we automate first? How should we decide where to deploy our AI resources within the enterprise?
So this is something that as we engage with customers, we are in these conversations every single day. And so we here have started to think about this as, and not surprisingly, given my McKinsey background, a 2x2, right? So what we have on the y-axis is the level of critical thinking that's needed. This we're applying almost to the world of agents, right? So what's the level of solutioning that the agent is being expected to operate at? And then the x-axis is, okay, how many times does that task gets done, right? So in a given week, is it multiple times? Is it only quarterly? What is the frequency at which this task or workflow is getting done? And what we are finding is that people tend to feel more comfortable starting with an activity that's high repeatability, right? So it's worthwhile to put in some sort of agentic flow here or AI-based solution, but it's not incredibly high on the critical thinking axis, right? So it's like, okay, let's start simple. We know it happens a lot. So we know we would get a good ROI if we were to be able to leverage AI in this situation, but let's make sure that we even get the quality we want and the effectiveness we want, and frankly, the reception on the other end, right? Because often AI is dealing with other humans, right? So that's where we kind of see on the bottom right-hand corner, people starting to enter into how they leverage AI. At the company level, like they sit around and they have a conversation about, should we deploy AI here? If yes, what should be the investment, et cetera. You see some organic use cases in the lower left, right? Where it's low critical thinking, low repeatability, but maybe every now and then someone uses an agent to help them write an email or something like that, but it's not something that at the corporate level people would have strategic discussions about. And then, of course, Nirvana is in the upper right-hand corner, right? So this is high critical thinking, but it's also high repeatability, right? So all of a sudden, if you go through the work of creating that agent or building that AI solution, there is a higher ROI available to you, right? And the beauty, of course, of these models is you can start and then you can test and test and test and optimize, right? So even if you don't get it perfectly right the first time, there is an iterative element to this. And so this is how we think about it, and even how we think about how people think about our own technology, right? Which is, hey, what's your on-ramp into this AI first strategy, right? Which tends to be the lower right, as I mentioned. But ultimately, we're trying to get people up on our platform to the upper right.
So if we're thinking about the company that doesn't really want to be AI first, and they're kind of forced into this world.
Yes.
It prefers to wait and see what happens. There's a lot of uncertainty. I don't know, do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? I want some of the dust to settle. What should they do? How can they get productivity out of AI without going all the way?
Yeah. So we have seen companies take this stance for various reasons. And I would say that the most important part is that there's some team in the company that is piloting AI. So maybe it's the case that they're not quite ready to open up the floodgates to all employees, or they're not quite at the point where they want to deploy a function-wide solution. But there is a team within the organization that's thinking through, what is the governance we want to put in place? What are our rails in terms of how we want to operate with AI? What is one thing we want to test, almost just running water through the pipes so they start to get an understanding? And it is important that someone in the company start to be the go-to person on how they're thinking about deploying AI in the company. And I say that because the world is moving so quickly, and there's always so much to learn, that establishing that foundational understanding of how your own company and other companies around you can leverage AI starts to give the familiarity with the overall functionality, so that at the appropriate time, then the enterprise can take full advantage of it.
So if they want to move a little more slowly, and their culture supports that, they should actually do it, or should they try to jump and say we're going to be destroyed if we don't do that?
Well, I mean, as we all know, you can have one strategy, but if you don't have effective change management, nothing actually happens. So I think it's a lot to do with how change is driven in an organization, right? There's classic elements to how you drive change in an organization. There's one is the role modeling, right? So someone in the organization would be showing like how great it is to use AI and what they got out of it. There's the storytelling of like, why is it beneficial for us as an organization to actually leverage this in pockets? It doesn't have to be universally. And it's the how, right? A lot of people don't actually know how to leverage AI, right? And so some companies are getting accounts for people to play around with AI, right? And then the final is incentives. So there's this 4-part component to change management. It applies to pretty much every business processes I've ever tried to affect in operating land. And it applies here as well for AI, right? So then the incentive of congratulations, you've leveraged AI. What's the reward? We, sing your praises. Maybe there's some fun award, maybe there's some monetary value, but really getting people excited about it, right? Now, at the same time, there does always have to be, and this is what we face every day, like the stack has to be able to accommodate it in the enterprise, right? There is a reality of, where is the unstructured data? Where is the structured data? How is it permissioned? How is it governed? The IT team really needs to think deeply about that and make sure they have a content strategy, right? So that the organization is set up to be successful in the era of AI first.
That's great. So Box is not that company, it's ahead of the curve. So let's return to Box.
Okay.
How do you think about deploying AI at Box today? And as an operator, how do you approach these decisions?
So we drink our own champagne. So I think the term used to be eat your own dog food, but we've
Champagne is much better.
yes,
Yeah.
yep. We're drinking our own champagne, and that's good for so many reasons. One is it actually pressure tests our own product. Obviously, we're using product before it's generally available out to our customers. But also it also gives us a sense of use cases and value impact, and whether we really should be evangelizing XYZ element or whether this other element is more important. So we live and breathe AI every day in everything that we do because we leverage the Box platform. And Box is unique in that it's not an add-on, right? These other companies have decided to make AI in many situations an add-on, whereas for us, it's embedded in the platform, right? So we use it across the spectrum, actually. So we leverage the platform to really pull in all of the information of all the content across our company. So imagine a world where all of the content of your company is on one platform. And then, of course, it still lives and breathes by permissioning and all of that, because even at Box, the finance team can't see everything the HR team can see, and the sales team can't see everything the HR team. So, we're operating within a governance model. And then we kind of let all the flowers bloom. Now, the ones that pop to the top are actually, we have a slide here, right? So everything in pink is Box AI. That's where we're leveraging AI to do the actual activity. And you'll see here, it goes everything from creating marketing collateral, right? Like if you put all of your marketing collateral you've ever created in a hub in Box, and then you ask it to create a new campaign for this purpose targeted at this ICP, it will literally create it for you. So it's pretty magical, and people are loving it, and it obviously saves time, but it also is kind of a thought partner, right, to all of the practitioners. We use it for RFPs, right? So we have processes where requests for proposals come into the sales team, and actually it gets auto-populated based on the information that we already have, what we knew that we can provide at Box. So a process that used to take multiple people, multiple weeks, is now completely automated. And then, of course, there's a QA check, but completely done automated on our platform. Now, there are places where we really have leaned in, and I would say customer support and customer success is one of those functional areas that it hits on the high repeatability right there. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you see a number of solutions, right? We have our own element to that solution, which we call Box Support Sensei. And that is every customer success manager who previously would have filed a product support ticket to ask a technical question no longer has to. They just go into this hub. It has all of the questions and all of the answers that we've ever asked and answered. And all of a sudden, the ticket volume going into our support team, just from internal flows, has dramatically gone away, right? So that's an amazing tool for us, and ones that we're getting a ton of leverage out of. Then we are working with actually a early stage company here in the Valley that is doing the actual chatbot that is exposed to the customer. It's a company called Acera. You see it on the bottom right there. And there you have customers asking questions, and that minimizes the number of tickets, right? Because by virtue of being able to get the answer to their question, then they then don't have to go into our queue and actually log a ticket. And then once they're in our queue, if they in fact still have a question, then we leverage the AI that Zendesk brings. So what happens in that flow is actually the AI of Zendesk, which is a customer support, we use it for customer support, proposes an answer that should go back to the customer, and the agent, our own Boxer, looks over the response, makes sure it's right, and then sends it out. But as you can imagine, that saves a tremendous amount of time. Yeah.
Okay. So the customer interface is the agent, and the system helps the agent work with the customer, or in some cases you have customers interacting directly with the system without the agent.
In the case of our own Boxers, they're leveraging all of the knowledge of all of our technical material that we put in a curated hub, right? Because we want to make sure the content they're accessing is the correct content. And then they're using that information to engage directly with the customer, but they don't have to ask anyone for help. Typically, customer success, if it's a very technical question, will have to go back over to technical support because they're much deeper on the technical side. So that whole element is not with an agent, but it's leveraging the AI generated response to the question, right? Now, the Acera one, which is a chat bot, right, is actually the customer interacting directly with the chatbot. I think at some point we'll just talk about everything as agents. Like, it will be hard to delineate what's an agent versus what is just knowledge that we're getting leveraging AI. But there are instances exactly where our customers are engaging directly with a chatbot or an agent. Yes.
So how do you do the triage? How do you know what goes to an automated agent and what goes to a customer service rep that looks at the system and responds to the customer? How does that work?
Actually, it's like classic lean for those of you who are supply chain and have studied lean. The first is, how do you reduce the ticket volume in the first place? So how do you just make sure that customers have their questions answered before they even have to get into your flow? And that we do that in two ways. One, if the customer would normally come to us on our platform, kind of in an outward facing way, and log a ticket, that is now being reduced by this outward facing chatbot. But customers also come to us just personally, right? Because we have customer success managers who have relationship with these customers, right? And so all of a sudden they're sending an email, or they're sending a text, or they're calling their customer success person, right? And that's another situation where if it got too technical, then the customer success person would have to turn over to the technical team and ask the question. And instead, now they just go into Box Support Sensei, they ask the question, the response is provided to them. And so that whole workload that typically would have gone to our more technical support team just never shows up on their doorstep.
And do you see some of these phone calls being converted? Do you measure conversion of phone calls to bots over time based on the knowledge that is developed in the system? How does that work?
Well, our leading indicator is ticket volume, right? So we expect our ticket volume to go down over time because people are getting answers to their questions before they have to actually log a ticket. So that's kind of the leading indicator. Now we're at a time, and for those of you who are in it and trying to figure out AI and leveraging these tools, where people actually just have more questions, right? Because the complexity of the very solution they're trying to implement is higher, right? And so we have to normalize what is the higher volume, just because we're in this world of more questions about this new technology, and what then is our ability to triage out the number of tickets. So that's kind of what our business analytics team looks at and does for us effectively. Yeah.
And do you see that sometimes success creates more tickets because people are happy that they get answers, so they ask more questions?
Uh, well, for the most part, if people get their questions answered, they try
They
not
have
to
work to
come
do.
back. Yeah. Yeah. And so we also have, like, oh, I'll just pick out another one, sales knowledge portal, right? So now every seller that comes on board to Box, they ramp in a minimal amount of time because they go into this hub. They can ask any question of the hub. I need to pitch a retail company on their ability to run franchise supply chain on the platform of Box. I mean, I don't even know where you would begin if you had to just start going through folders and files. I mean, we all know you'd like email the person, but if you're new, you don't know who to email. You may or may not have an expert that has their job at your company, right? And so now you're literally, you can know any pitch that's ever been done to any retail customer for this topic in a minute. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. So our sales knowledge portal on Box using Box AI has just been a complete game changer for us in terms of accessibility of knowledge, but also onboarding folks, right? Like, they can be experts on what our intelligence is, within a week. Whereas before it was all about who you knew, how to access the pockets of information, all those things that we know well about how working in a corporation actually works. Yeah.
So can you paint us a picture of what this will look like in 5 years once everything is sorted out, hopefully? What will be the experience from a customer's point of view, and how will it be delivered from Box's point of view?
Yeah, so some of this technology is still working out its kinks. Like, I'm very confident about the Box AI technology. We leverage it every day, but I definitely have startups coming in at least once a week pitching me on some new tech with some new value proposition, and you can tell, like, it's not quite there, right? So we still have some ways to go on some of the value propositions that startups and these companies, these AI based companies, have out in the market, right? I think we saw the evolution with ChatGPT. The first answers were kind of interesting and good, and now it's just at a whole new level. But of course, that's a company that has tens and tens and tens of billions of investment dollars, right? So these other startups, while they will move quickly, I don't expect that within the next 12 months, all the functionality that's been promised by all these startups will be actually viable, right? So I think there's just a reality check there, and it's important that those of us who are operating are testing into these solutions. But especially when you're like me, like at a public company, you do have to be mindful of, you can't just like try every technology and see if it works, and then what if there's damage, what if there's vulnerabilities, all of that, right? So you definitely have to make sure these technologies are pressure tested before you put them into your environment. So that's kind of like, I'm answering your question for the next 12 months, right? The next 5 years, I do think we will be at a place where much of the day-to-day activity of research, of knowledge finding, of getting pieces of information out of content really will be automated. And so then it turns to, okay, what are the jobs to be done? Right? There still are jobs to be done. It's calling up the customer and having that conversation and talking to them about the pros and cons about implementing a solution. It is talking to people about solutions. It's managing a team of engineers. It is, all of the human to human elements that are part of our daily life, at least in running a business, I think will continue. But it is very real that you really might not have to hire as many people to do the very work that's getting done today. And or we continue to advance our expectations so much that we hire the same number of people, but the level and the quality and the depth at which we do the work of an enterprise is 10x'd because of just the capability of agents.
So this ties back to one of the questions that we actually have in the Q&A. And the question specifically is, what do you see now as the effect of headcount? What do you expect will happen? Do you have any, and beyond headcount, do you have any other metrics that you're tracking and you can share with us, or identify metrics that people should be looking at?
Yeah, so at first we're looking at usage, right? So that's a leading indicator, and you can't get the benefits of AI if you don't actually use it. And so as a executive team, we look at usage not only of our own product, right? So what is the usage of Box AI for the customers that have Box, right? But then what is our own usage internally within our enterprise, right? And where are we seeing it? We have something called Box on Box. We map out the use cases of where's the finance team doing Box on Box? Where's the marketing team doing Box on Box? And then we have set up metrics for each of those to assess impact. But, we're early in this, like just as a reminder, right? Like our fiscal starts Feb 1. And so for Feb 1, we had all these Box on Box, but we're like a couple months in here. So it's all very exciting, but it's more about how do you get the usage? How do you get the awareness, the change management I was speaking about before, and then some sense of metrics, right? I would say you always have to baseline. So you have to understand what's the metric you're solving for, whether it's number of tickets deflected, whether it's ability to run research reports and how many are you able to run with the staff you have. It might be RFPs answered, right, in the context of sales. So we have different metrics for each of them. Now, all of them ultimately add up into like hours saved from a productivity perspective. And then, of course, there's the element of quality that is also equally as important. It can't be translated into hours saved, but you might see it in things like win rates or customer satisfaction, right? Because they appreciate the answers are that much better to their questions. So we think through those as well. Yeah, and it's going to be a fun year. I'm really excited to see by the end of the year where we're going to come out in terms of the impact we'll have seen. And we're obviously starting to see early impact now, but just getting a full 12 months under our belt will be fun.
So if there's an enterprise that says, I can see that the customer service is a very promising area, highly repeatable, the data is ready, almost ready, and I want to move forward, what's your recommendations to them?
Yes. So first, I would say make sure you have a governance model. All right. It doesn't have to be vastly bureaucratic or anything like that. But there does clearly, and any IT leader and any CISO and any organization will, of course, be thinking about this. But really understanding and making it clear throughout the company what that governance model is. The second is make sure your content is curated and in a place where you can actually drive AI across it. What we tend to see in the enterprise is you have so much siloing of unstructured data that not only is it tends to be insecure because you have content leak, it tends to be highly expensive, right? Because you're maintaining so many different repositories. And often it tends to be, insecure, right? So but the biggest issue when it comes to AI is you're not able to move across all of that content, right? So of course, that's how we think about the Box platform, right? It really brings the ability of AI to do its work because it's all in one place. It has the ability to have the governance, and then the tech stack is in a place where AI can be deployed.
And of course, what the company should do depends on the level of maturity that it has
Yes.
in AI.
Yeah.
So let's drill down into that and add the time and progress dimension to the discussion. So how do you think about companies' maturity in terms of where they are, where Box is, where other companies are in that spectrum of capabilities?
So we are on this journey, and I would say this maturity curve is probably only something we could have put together a month ago, which is pretty much where when we did, because we're living this now. And there are even steps along this maturity curve that just aren't possible because the technology is not there yet, right? But if you want to think about the full arc of how a company can leverage AI and really become an AI first company, you have this early stepping stone where it's primarily used for basic information, right? Someone's asking a query of content that they have, and really in every scenario, a human is doing the decision making, it's driving the workflow, and the AI is just leveraged for a little more insight, a little more information, right? And I would say for the most part, companies are there today. Now, some companies have not yet even allowed that to happen, right? They've shut off access to ChatGPT. They don't have any AI across any of their surfaces. But I would say that at least at an enterprise level, we're kind of moving into this first step along this overall ladder, right? And then we get to a world where agents start clicking in, right? So you go from asking a query, which is kind of this step number one, to, okay, now I've actually created an agent that will work across a predetermined workflow, all right? And so an example might be like something that we've enabled a bank to do, right? So someone applies for a loan, they submit their 3 last pay stubs, and they submit their address, all of that. Normally, previously, someone at the bank would have had to open each of those attachments, hand key in the information in those attachments into the appropriate form, and then determine whether it would be approved based on the information that was provided by the applicant, right? Well, you can automate all that on Box, right? Not to sound like an advertisement on Box, but just as an example of you can fully automate that workflow now with an agent, right? Those 3 things get submitted. No one has to open any type of document. The metadata gets extracted through the workflow. The information from those attachments are actually automatically put into some decision-making rubric, and then the applicant is told whether they've been approved or not. Right, so that's an example of a predetermined workflow. The human has defined the process, they're monitoring and QAing it, but that is available to us, right? And so there are companies right now leveraging the Box platform to do that. And I'm sure on other technologies, there's examples of that as well. So I would say like a portion of the enterprise have latched onto this and are already getting dramatic efficiency gains from that and better customer experience, right? Because what used to take 5 days to review now takes 5 minutes. And then you're on the third step of the ladder, right? Where actually it's not only that the agent has been given a task and they can do it in a repeated manner, but now you have agents talking to other agents. And this is where it starts to get a little mind-blowing, right? But you have one agent talking to another agent to solve a problem, right? And this can be a world where there's an agent for an application, right? So it could be the Box agent talking to the Salesforce agent that talks to the Google BigQuery agent, right? So you can imagine that. You could have agents within enterprises, right? So you could have a seller agent talking to a marketing agent and determining what should be the collateral that they use for a certain pitch, right? So it can be multiple scenarios, but this concept of agents talking to other agents to solve a problem, of course, humans are providing the oversight of that and even setting the strategic direction. But now you sort of have this agentic to agentic engagement. And then the fourth step, and this has not, you can see it a little bit in some places that are really pushing the edge of it, but I don't see it really showing up in the enterprise yet, where the agents are self-optimizing, right? So not only have they done the workflow, they've engaged with other agents, but they actually have an opinion, not to anthropomorphize it, but they have recommendations as to how they would optimize the workflow even better than the workflow that was pre-assigned to them by the human. And there you have humans actually are then able to approve, okay, is this optimized version the better version? And then let's move from there, right? So that is truly nirvana, because the agents start to have their own pattern recognition, not just about the query or the task, but about the overall process, right? So there's a complexity there that's pretty mind-blowing. And then finally, at the top of the curve, you have an AI agent that actually is independently identifying what are the needs of the company, what are the set of business trade-offs that need to be made for this business function, and humans are kind of at the top setting the vision. This is like a mind-blowing version of the world. I don't know when we're going to get there. Even me mentally, I'll have to ease into that one, but kind of it's guaranteed that there is this continuum and there is a point where that will be achieved.
So let's talk about the when, because that's important, right? So I see in the chart, we are here, so kind of lots of companies are in the second rung. So we have some experience on how long it takes to go from first to second. So what can you tell us about that? And can you also speak to what you expect will happen going from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 5? Let's keep it open, because we don't really know.
Yeah, I would say, since I'm a data-oriented person, if you were to take the Fortune 2000 and map it, I would say that half are at, maybe 20% are nowhere. They haven't adopted AI, although it's coming. Half are on that first rung. And then I would say still the minority are in that second rung. And in terms of the movement, I think the first is, well, how do people leverage AI safely in the context of the enterprise environment to ask a question, right? And you might see them asking a question of content that's on the Box platform. You might see them asking a question of a Microsoft document that can also be on the Box platform, but say they don't have Box, you might see them asking a question from Copilot across their suite. But again, you're just, in that case, you're limited to Microsoft information, right? You can have the same thing occur kind of in a Google environment for content there. You might have a tool that you leverage to do a certain function, like a Zendesk for customer support, where you might be asking the tool itself a question, right? And I think that's that will become more and more common for people to gain familiarity with that. What needs to happen, of course, is that people need to be explained how to do it safely from a perspective of data leakage, vulnerabilities, not copying enterprise data into ChatGPT so that you can ask ChatGPT a question. There's all sorts of places where people inadvertently could start to share enterprise data just because they want to get an answer to a question, right? So there has to be monitoring around that. There has to be teaching around that, and guidance and governance. So there's a lot of work from a change management perspective to be done just safely, I would say, doing that first rung. Now, of course, the return and the value is incredible, so it's worth going through that, but it's definitely something that enterprises need to be thinking about. For the next one, this is where it tends to be driven by business functions, right? So it tends to be the person at a bank who realizes that they could get their loan application process to a fifth the time, all right, because they've been tinkering with AI, they understand what the availability is to it. So then they need to go work with the IT team to make sure that all of this is done in a safe way where people are getting appropriate information, and that there is, in fact, a content strategy and content governance and permissioning and all of that I've said. So I think it really becomes the first one is more kind of like the bottom up groundswell, right? Where people are trying it for themselves. By the time you get to the second step of the ladder, it's much more at a function level where, okay, we're gonna drive AI through a workflow, and it's far more intentional in that regard, right? Because it has to be set up correctly, it has to be QA'd, there has to be change management around it, right? So it has to be much more intentional. Now there's huge amount of returns, and we see it in our company, right? So it's definitely worth doing, but it's a far more intentional step than the first one.
So we have two questions which are on different topics, but both of them focus on kind of how to change, how to manage that change. One of them looks at the human dimension. And the question is, people are exhausted. We're moving so fast and we need to move and move and move. And the question is, what do you do internally to support managers in this change process, where we spoke about it a little bit, but we can probably expand on that. Totally different question, but also on this change process is really what kind of tools, if I'm starting from the first rung, what kind of tools are available to get started, to learn, to move maybe a little more slowly from the first to the second rung.
So I'll take the first one. So, and then I'll proceed to the second one. So the first one, in terms of supporting our managers, here we advocate everyone does Box on Box, right? Because it's our tool. We live in it all day long. We have zero security concerns. We know that our data is safe and protected, right? So that is more, let's talk through the different use cases. Let's make sure that people are sharing ideas. We actually have Friday lunch still, even though that we're over $1 billion and have over 3,000 employees. We still have a virtual Friday lunch every Friday, and we are always highlighting the different applications to it, and kind of the joy and the creativity and the effectiveness that people are able to achieve, right? So it's a lot about sharing the ideas, celebrating the ideas, and teaching other people how they too can do this kind of in their team or in their function throughout the company. And so from a manager perspective, we definitely have to teach everyone how to use the tool, right? Like, we're constantly coming out with new features and new functionality ourselves. So we are constantly training our own team members on, okay, what can you do? Like, now you can extract metadata. That's amazing. Now you can do a deep research question on that content. Okay, now you can actually use our Relay tool to automate a workflow, right? How do you do that? So we're in a constant teaching environment, and we kind of use it to highlight what people have figured out to do, but as a way to teach. The second part of your question is kind of, where do you begin? I would say there's one in a world of kind of like familiarity with AI, and I even though I live and breathe AI every day, I still do listen to a couple podcasts to make sure that I'm kind of hearing the broad ecosystem of AI, to make sure I'm always current on AI, the latest model, whatever people are finding, what's working, what's not working. So if anyone's kind of dipping their toe in, I would kind of advocate for some real time, like whether it's half an hour a day or whatever it may be, of just actually knowing the content itself. Now, then you turn to kind of like the hands-on part of that. And there's a lot of individual tools out there, as I mentioned, that people can play around with. And I heavily advocate that because that's a lens into what can be done in the enterprise. But then if you're in an enterprise environment, I would ask or figure out, which of the tools we're using right now have AI enabled, and then play around with that AI. Not all the IT teams have decided to turn AI for XYZ tool, right? So understanding what that is, but then if you're a manager or a leader, right, really asking people, what can we do to leverage AI? And that's like, we use OKRs at Box. One of my OKRs, I'm responsible for the go-to-market side of the house at Box. And so I've asked everyone, what is it that you're using AI for? What is the impact you're driving? And just prompting them and giving them permission to spend the time on it, because we all know the ROI is there, but it does take some time to learn it and play around with it and pilot it. So just celebrating that.
We have another question about, and I'm rephrasing it a little bit, it's about self-improving processes. So we have processes that execute a certain task. How do you think about using AI to improve these processes, or to let these processes improve themselves?
Yes, so that is, we're not quite there yet, but that is what I described as the fourth rung of the ladder, right? In terms of agents that can self-improve. And now, of course, it's the fact that LLMs learn, right? And you do have agents that have memory, right? So they understand what you've asked in the past. And now companies are baking in quite a lot of longitudinal memory. Like they might remember what you asked a month ago, right? It's all about kind of the ability and the amount of complexity that the app designer wants to put on how much memory it gives an agent, right? So you have that's kind of the first step, right? Which is, okay, it's not just you have memory within this session, but you have memory of every question I've ever asked you. So you're starting to understand the patterns of my questions, and you're able even to pull out the responses that you provided from previous questions into this new question that you're asking me 2 weeks later, right? So that, I think, is kind of like the baby half step. And then you get to, okay, well, you've asked me to execute a workflow, but now I'm going to start proposing, or even sometimes might just be doing shortcuts to that workflow, right? And that is more of like, we've defined the outcome that we want the agent to achieve. And we give it permission to self-optimize.
And when you have a process where different agents are kind of owned by different parts of the ecosystem, how do you manage that improvement process?
Yes, so we are moving to a world of agents talking to agents. For those of you following kind of tech news, you'll see Salesforce did away with Dreamforce. They had Agentforce. All of Google's announcements at Next just a couple of weeks ago were at Agent Space. You're going to have to keep all these names clear between Agentforce and Agent Space, and everything will have the word agent in front of it. But it is this concept of this layer where, as an enterprise, you are executing and directing agents to speak to other agents. All right. So say I am an insurance company, and I have all of the insurance claims on the Box platform. So all of my unstructured data is sitting on the Box platform. When people submit a photograph of a damaged car, or they submit the write-up of what happened in the accident, right? That's all in forms that people filled out. So it's all sitting on Box. But all my pricing and risk models are sitting in BigQuery in Google, all right? And so I need to know how much I should pay for a certain insurance claim, and I ask the Box agent to talk to the BigQuery agent and to give me an answer, right? You kind of need a layer in which that is enabled, and you see these different companies coming in and saying, I'll be that layer, I'll be that layer, right? And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, Salesforce is a SaaS company that's originally a CRM company. So will people give them permission to be that horizontal agentic layer to be determined. You know, Google might have a more natural fit there, but they have to actually have great technology and deliver on that value proposition, right? And so I think that'll be an interesting place for us who are living in it day to day to see how it evolves. It's not here yet. It's not here yet.
No.
But you know, those companies tell us it's here, but you can't actually execute or do business on it. Give it a couple of quarters, it'll come fast. Yeah.
So should enterprises build their own agents, or should they buy existing agents? How should they think about the buy versus subscribe versus build decision for agents?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a software company, you should build, you know, you should make available your agents available into the ecosystem, right? So if you're Box, you not only want a Box agent on agent space, but you actually want entire pre-built agent workflows, right? So here's the RFP respond agent, right? And we've pre-built that agent for you. It will execute an RFP response. You just click on that agent and it executes, right? So, and that's literally what we're doing now. So it's super fun to be in that mode. So if you're a software company, yes, you should build your own agents. If you are, you know, I don't know, manufacturing blankets.
Yeah.
Right, you will be leveraging the agents of different parts of your technology stack. You might also have an IT team that spins up manager agents. I mean, now we're kind of in this fourth rung here, right, where those agents are overseeing other agents that have a task. I don't think we're there yet, so I don't think people need to start working on that quite yet.
So another question on kind of software companies versus agents. Some people say that, you know, agents will kill SaaS, software as a service, because everything will be done through agents and so on. And the other point of view is actually, you know, software companies are in the best position to build those agents. So, you know, I can imagine that Box is on the second camp, but can you speak to that question?
Yes, you know, in these, we've seen so many tech shifts over time, and the answer is like, it's never black and white. It's never all one thing or all another, as I think we've seen, right? Even the migration to the cloud, there's still people who are on-prem, right? So we thought that would happen decades ago, and yet here we are. So I would say that there will still be a role for, I think it'll take a while for software companies to be abstracted away and for agents to just be talking to other agents. At the end of the day, and this is why, you know, not to be an advertisement for Box, but why we feel like we're so strongly positioned. You still need to have your data, right? And you need to access that data, and there has to be governance on that data, right? And permissioning and governance is no easy task. Right. And so who has access to the data is kind of paramount to any of these agents working in a responsible way. So at a minimum, you'll need some layer of organization and curation and governance, right? Otherwise, like, all company secrets will be available to all. And I do think that there is just a level of expertise that's required to build out the capabilities of the agents, that it will take some time before someone can just like spin up their own agent and do the equivalent of a CRM, of an entire CRM system, as an example. Yeah.
And just as a matter of relative advantage, probably, you know, if you have a generalizable agent, it's not efficient for each company to build its own, right?
Right. Well, and that's the idea of this agentic layer, right? Which is, you can deploy other people's agents very effectively and not have to build each of those agents yourself, right? And so how do you actually harness the power across all those agents in a way that doesn't require you're spinning up all your own agents? We're really out there. So, you know, if people's heads are spinning, we don't worry, it'll take us a couple quarters before this is even remotely possible.
So we have a question. So this is the final question. We're getting to the end of our event, but it's a very good question. So how have you used AI in your own go-to-market and sales process?
Yes.
And
So
what are the initial results so far?
Yeah. So I'll go through each part of the funnel, right? So the marketing team has done a fantastic job. I mean, it's really so many different variations of this, but I would say the major use case is writing marketing collateral for a given situation or for a given persona or for a given event, pulling on all the text that we've ever written, the positioning, the brand information, all of that's already in what we call this marketing hub, right? So you can get like a very, very good straw man based on asking Box AI to write a specific set of collateral for you based on all the content we already have. So that's been a game changer for us. It's also as simple as, we're running an RFP. We're having to source all these different things because we're throwing a huge conference, right? And you put all those proposals into a hub and you just are able to ask questions about prices and timing and all of that, right? And you say like, build me a table of this, and it's done. So it really permeates kind of everything we do, but for marketing, it's a lot about building collateral and narratives. For our sales team, the RFP process has been completely automated. We get in a lot of RFPs globally. We're a global company, a lot of government RFPs, a lot of regulated industry RFPs. So really, we have those are auto-generated in the response, which is, as you can imagine, you used to have like RFP response teams in my previous lives. And then, of course, everything about a customer. So you go to meet with a customer and you can query every interaction Box has ever had with that customer, right? So it's immensely powerful in that regard. And then customer success, I think I mentioned before about this ability to answer customer questions that actually might not be at the level that a customer success person would know, but that technical information is easily available to them as a result. And then, of course, we have operations teams and partner teams, and especially the operations teams can get pretty much any answer to any analysis question now on the back of Box, which is pretty incredible.
Well, that was terrific. Thank you very much, Olivia, for
Yes.
helping us to take another step towards becoming an AI-first company. And let me say just a few words about our next couple of events before we wrap up. So we have 2 events planned for the next couple of months. The first event will take place on May 19, and we will welcome 2 guest speakers from e-commerce company JD.com. They are Max Shan, who is the chief scientist at JD.com and a professor at the University of Hong Kong, Yongqi Chi, who is the director of the supply chain algorithm team at JD.com. And together they will help us think about how to leverage machine learning to enhance supply chain efficiency and improve the customer experience. The following month, we're going to be joined by Joe McMorrow, who is the Vice President of Supply Chain Strategy and Transformation at Cisco. And of course, Cisco offers industry-leading portfolio of technology innovations spanning networking, security, collaboration, and more. And in the session, Joe will help us think about how Cisco is using AI across the supply chain to offer insights into this transformation journey. We'll talk about some of the key lessons they've learned and his vision for what's coming next. So we really hope you will join us for both of these forthcoming sessions. And now I'm going to hand it back to Barchi.
Thank you, Haim, and thank you, Olivia, for a very insightful discussion. As I mentioned earlier, we ask that you please take a moment to complete our very brief survey. You can access it easily using the QR code displayed on the screen. We also encourage you to use the link shown on the right to access the Value Chain Innovation Initiative website, where in a few days we'll provide more information about the upcoming events that Haim just mentioned. You can also find on our website links to the recordings of all our past events. And with that, we conclude today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you in future events.